This has to be the epitome of fine dining. Last year, my friend David and I bought a 4.5-pound A5 Wagyu rib roast from Crowd Cow. It was incredible. We tried it plain and a couple of other ways. I'll link the video in the description if you haven't seen it yet. But we did have leftovers and froze them into small steaks, so I figured almost a year later it was time to bring one of them back to life. You can see how much it's discolored over time. I probably should have eaten these sooner, but better late than never. It's still gonna taste great. We're making these crispy rice squares, which is not my idea, but I've seen it all over the internet and I had to try it. I started the day before so I could make my sushi rice and rest it overnight, which, speaking of rice, I'm using short grain sushi rice for this. It is a little more on the expensive side, but it does hold together better than any other rice, and that's what we're going to need it to do in this application. I added about 300 grams of dry rice into a sieve over a bowl because we need to wash this first. So I fill the bowl until the rice is submerged, and then I start to agitate it with my hands just to get as much starch off as possible. Then I dump that water and repeat this process 2 more times. I wash my sushi rice 3 times because I want to ensure all of that excess starch is gone. Otherwise, you're going to risk it becoming mushy and clumpy, which you don't want. Then I'm adding the washed rice along with 360 ml of water to my rice cooker and letting it do the rest. You should seriously get a rice cooker if you don't have one. In the meantime, we can prep our sushi rice seasoning, which for this amount of rice consists of 50 ml of rice vinegar, 13 grams of sugar, and 5 grams of salt. We just add all those to a small sauce pot and heat them over medium-low until everything is dissolved. Then once the rice is done, I'm transferring it to this large wide bowl because it has a lot of surface area, which is going to allow us to disperse the heat and steam quicker. Once I have it all spread out, I'm going to slowly drizzle in the seasoning while using the spatula to kind of disperse it around the bowl. Just mix everything around, continuing to try to disperse that steam. Then you can let it cool off for about 10 to 15 minutes before we package it for the fridge. I'm using a 9x9 baking dish for this amount of rice. You could probably get away with using a 9x13, your squares are just going to be a little thinner. I'm putting a layer of plastic wrap on the bottom of this dish, pressing it into the corners and sides. This is going to help us get our rice out cleanly in one piece. I'm just spooning in our cooled rice, again pressing into the sides and corners. Once it's all in, you want to gently pack it into an even layer because we want to have even squares. You don't have to force all your strength on it, but you do want to press this enough so everything sticks together. Then I'm just covering with a lid and resting this in the fridge overnight. I'm also using this as an opportunity to thaw my steak in the fridge overnight. The next step on the next day is to get some neutral frying oil heating. I'm using my deep cast iron Dutch oven and I'm using a candy thermometer to keep temperature. I'm heating this to 325F, which is about 160C. I think that's a good frying temperature for our rice. While that's heating, we can take our rice out of the fridge and remove it from its container. Then using a sharp knife, I'm just trimming off the edges because they kind of taper off and I don't want that in my squares. I'm definitely saving these scraps to make like a fried rice later. And then I'm just making 2 cuts each horizontally and vertically to make 3x3 squares, which is 9. You could do 4x4 if you want smaller and more squares, but that's up to you. And once the oil's at temperature, we can begin frying. I'm doing 3 squares at a time because these are kind of delicate and they can break or stick together, especially at the beginning. So just be careful and try not to touch them too much unless you're trying to keep them away from each other. And then I'm flipping them every 30 seconds or so each side can get direct heat from the bottom. Mine each took between 4 and 5 minutes. They're done when they're slightly golden brown like this. You don't want them to be too browned or else they'll be too hard. I remove each of them to a wire rack lined baking sheet to drain, and I'm immediately hitting them with some Malden flaky salt for extra flavor, and I'm storing them in my oven set to its lowest temperature while I repeat the process with the rest of the squares. Now we just need to make our steak. I save this for last because I want it to be slightly warm when we serve this, which, by the way, I let this sit about 45 minutes at room temperature so the middle of it won't be too cold when we put it in the pan. All I'm adding to this Wagyu is a little bit of kosher salt on all sides before laying it into a dry cast iron that's been preheating on medium-high for about 5 minutes. I'm flipping this about every 30 seconds or so to get an even crust on both sides without overcooking the middle. In order to help with that sear, you can use some grill weights, or if you don't have any like me, you can just use a small sauce pot and press it on top of the steak. After a few minutes of flipping and searing, I had a nice brown crust, and I temped it a little over 120 Fahrenheit, which is a little more than I wanted, but it'll be alright. I just pulled that off to a cutting board to rest and seal the juices in for about 5 minutes while I got the rest of my ingredients ready. Once it's rested, I'm going to start cutting thin strips that are going to fit onto my rice squares. You can see how I slightly overcooked the inside, but Wagyu is so forgiving that it's still going to taste amazing. Look at how much fatty richness this stuff has. Incredible. For final assembly, I'm just arranging a few of my rice squares on a plate, and then I'm carefully adding a small strip of Wagyu to each. And then I'm hitting them with just a touch of this lava salt that I got when I visited Iceland last year. This brings amazingly deep and smoky flavor. You have to try it if you get a chance someday. And then I'm zesting over some of this cured egg yolk that I made. If you want to see how I did it, it's in the video I posted right before this one. These pack an umami flavor bomb, and they are the perfect pairing for our Wagyu. Last but not least, I'm just sprinkling over some thinly sliced chives for some beautifully colorful garnish. And that, my friends, is probably the fanciest thing I've ever made and possibly ever will. Let's just take a moment to bask in its beauty, and then let's dig in. This is potentially the greatest day of my life. There's not much to be said here. This is just one of those experiences that you have to live through to understand. This is the result of a hefty bit of work, but mostly just a lot of money, especially for the steak. But every once in a while, I think it's okay for the soul to splurge like this. Let me start with one of these scraps from the cutting board. It's just one of those tastes that's unforgettable, and there's nothing that can replicate it. That is so amazing. All right, let's get in here. You know what? It's kind of cooled off because of all the pictures and stuff I had to take, but it's still gonna be amazing. Cheers. There's still some pink in the steak. We have that crispy rice on the outside, but you still have your soft and chewy rice in the middle. This is perfection. Sometimes there's just no words to explain something, and this is one of those times. I understand that not everybody's going to be able to have A5 Wagyu in their lives, but if you really ever come across the opportunity or you want to save up to do it, you have to do it. You don't have to do all this. You can try the steak by itself like I did the first time, and that's going to be plenty enough to give you a lifetime experience. And yeah, there might be people in the comments that talk about me ruining the taste of the steak because I'm adding all these extra flavors to it, and so be it. I've already done the steak by itself, so this is my second go around with some from the freezer, and I just wanted to try something different, and all these extra flavors we put in are just bomb. But because we have a little sushi rice, I wanted to try this with a little soy sauce on the bottom. Just absolutely unbelievable. I know you hear me crunching on these things, but let me give you a little more ASMR. I mean, literally, what more is there to say? This is amazing. I kind of owe it to having a channel that I went and did something like this, because I don't know if I would just go and do that on my own, but the incentive of making a video out of it was something I couldn't pass up. So I know there's not many of us right now, but if you're one of the few that puts in the time and watches these videos, then I hope there's some form of enjoyment or knowledge that I'm able to pass to you. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me, just that you're here. This is going to be an incredibly memorable day, and I'm just feeling great right now. So thank you all that are watching, and I'll see you all next time. Crunch City. Goodness gracious. My life has changed.